Former U.S. Ambassador to Japan, Rahm Emanuel, is weighing in on the Democratic Party, calling its brand toxic, weak, and woke. Emanuel told the Wall Street Journal Democrats need to pivot back to the center if they want to win elections once again, and that the party has put too much focus on so-called culture war issues that are favored by progressives. Emanuel served in both the Biden and Obama administrations and was the mayor of Chicago. Now, he appears to be considering a presidential bid or a possible run for Illinois governor. Meanwhile, the Democratic Party is still searching for a path forward more than 6 months after President Trump swept the battleground states and won the 2024 election. A new piece from the New York Times analyzes the gradual split between the party and its traditional base, noting, quote, communities that Democrats had come to count on for a generation or more, young people, Black voters, Latinos, all veered toward the right in 2024, some of them sharply. But as the paper points out, even the attempts from the party to address these issues seems out of touch. Quote, Democratic donors and strategists have been gathering at luxury hotels to discuss how to win Black working class voters, commissioning new projects that can read like anthropological studies of people from faraway places. The prospectus for one new $20 million effort obtained by the Times aims to reverse the erosion of Democratic support among young men, especially online. It is codenamed SAM, short for Speaking with American Men, a strategic plan, and promises investments to study the syntax, language, and content that gains attention and virality in these spaces. It recommends buying advertisements and video games, among other things. Whoa. John Heilemann, what do you make of that effort, these moves by party leaders?
Well, Mika, I would say that the focus on language is something we've seen in a lot of political parties when they get into trouble. This is something, you can think back to the periods where the Republican Party has been out of favor. People think, oh, well, how do we talk differently? We have to reach this group. We have to reach that group. And the way to reach this group or that group is to tailor our messaging to try to reach those groups. And it turns out, at least in our lifetimes, that the way that you start to reach groups that you have lost favor with or that used to support the party but now don't, and you're losing traction with them, is partly a language thing, but really it's more of a substance thing. It's a thing of like, what does the party believe in? And so when I hear Rahm, enormous respect for Rahm Emanuel. He's accomplished a lot. I said this literally on the show last week. Alyssa Slotkin is another person who's been saying the same sort of thing. Weak and woke. That phrase is a phrase that various people who want to moderate the party have been throwing around. What I think is important here is not the question of what the party's image is, but is what does the party stand for? If the party takes positions on issues that are weak and woke, it will seem weak and woke. If it takes positions that are strong and not woke, that is the way to go forward. It's not about language. It's about where are you going to deviate from what has become Democratic ideological conformity. And again, I'm sure Rahm has examples. Alyssa Slotkin probably has examples, but that's the conversation. That's the debate. That's the work the Democrats have to do right now, is not thinking about their language. The language will follow the positions. The language will follow the substance. And what I am not hearing so far in this first 6 months after November 6th, after the big loss last year, is that kind of work, the kind of reform work that goes to what does this party want to believe in that will lure working class voters of all races back to it.
Gene Robinson, it's obviously this idea, some of the ideas that came out in this piece in the New York Times have come in for mockery on social media. We got to get down with the kids and talk to the men and all that stuff. Yeah. But that's all fair. But they do have the right idea, don't they, that they do need to talk to male voters, particularly young male voters who have really shown an affinity for Donald Trump and for the message of his party. It reminds me of people saying after the election last year that Democrats and liberals need their Joe Rogan. We don't just create a Joe Rogan. He became famous and influential to millions of people organically because people liked what he was saying and followed him down that way. So maybe the right idea here, it's the execution they might need to work on.
Right. It's you don't start, I think, in my opinion, the way forward on the language piece of this is not to accept the framing of the Republican Party and MAGA, right? So if your framing is woke versus anti-woke, I think you're already losing if you accept that framing. You have to come up with a different framing, and I think. Look, how do parties come back? They come back with a new focus. They come back with new candidates, and that's very important. So they need the ideas, and yes, they need to communicate better. But they need candidates who that people not just relate to, but that people want to believe in, because they believe those candidates believe in them, and that's the disconnect that they've got to bridge. I think back to after the McGovern debacle and how the party came back and how ultimately that ended up with Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was, half of that was a different message. Half of that was Bill Clinton. He was a great candidate, and so you have to have both those pieces working if you're really going to bring your party back.
So, Jon Heilemann, let's talk about those candidates, even though, of course, we're a long way from 2028. We are seeing, surprisingly early, a few would-be contenders make some early moves to put themselves out there, whether that's certainly starting a podcast like Gavin Newsom or, garnering more headlines on national issues like Governor Pritzker. And then there's Rahm Emanuel, who seems to be the least subtle of all right now, making a lot of moves from the day after the election to put himself in this conversation. We don't know that he's going to run per se, but he at least wants to have a voice.
That's right, John. And look, there's, Rahm started his life as a political strategist and a political tactician who worked in that Clinton White House that Eugene Robinson was just alluding to a second ago, and then made his way into elected politics, was one of the most successful, politically speaking, one of the more successful speakers of the House in recent years, leaders of the Democratic Party, not Speaker of the House, but leader of the Democratic Party at the DCCC when he led the Democrats back to the majority, and then went on and became mayor of Chicago, has served as White House chief of staff, and now as an ambassador. The man now has an enormous array of experience at every level of government, and I think anyone who doesn't take Rahm seriously as a candidate, the combination of his strategic savvy and the campaign know-how that he has, along with the fact that he has this now very formidable resume in elective governance, would be foolish. He's someone who people sometimes write off because of how blunt he is. People say, well, he's not polished enough, et cetera, et cetera. I think that there's more activity right now on the Democratic side in terms of people who are out testing the water right now earlier than in any presidential cycle that I've ever seen before. The question is, are we going to end up like we did in the 2020 cycle? People remember, we had 19, 20 Democratic candidates back in 2019 into 2020, and we ended up with Joe Biden winning. The most familiar of all of them ended up being the one the Democrats ended up picking. So again, I go back to the question of what is it that's going to, what are the substance? Bill Clinton put the party in a different direction when he embraced free trade, welfare reform, a variety of different things that Democrats in the previous two generations had rejected. Who's going to become the thought leader in this group? That's the question.
Right. Yeah, I think Rahm Emanuel is a fascinating potential contender, and it's interesting how he distills the message that he thinks Democrats should embrace. He doesn't suffer fools, and as you said, he's blunt. He cuts to the chase. It'll be interesting to see how that works. We'll be following that. And Jon Heilemann, thank you so much for coming on this morning. It's always good to see you.